Hi everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. Today's guest on Spotlight is Carolyn Davies. She's an entomologist and a conservation biologist. For this episode of Spotlight, Carolyn and I head outside into nature. We put our boots to the ground at the Creemore Nature Preserve in Creemore, Ontario. The Nature Conservancy of Canada manages this beautiful conservation area, promotes its native biodiversity, and has trails for public use. We could not have asked for a better day. But before we hit the trails, I asked Carolyn what kind of kid she was. Did she enjoy science? Did she love getting her hands dirty? And this is what she had to say.
Absolutely loved getting my hands dirty, always as a kid. I grew up sort of on the north shore of Lake Erie. And I think in that time in the 80s, we spent a lot of time without parental sort of supervision.
Yes,
and
we did.
My sister and I, we used to spend our time going exploring. That's what we called it. And that was, of course, doing things like, climbing down into the ravine, walking along the beach, building forts. And my family was actually, my father provided for us by working in the fishing industry. So I think we just had this inherent sort of connection with nature, just because we were in it and spent a lot of time, hiking the trails at Point Pelee and things like that. So I think we were just really surrounded by nature as I was a child. And I just always really loved it. Biologist is really just a scientist, a type of scientist that likes to learn about nature and to take action on ways that we can protect it from any kind of emerging threats. Those threats could be invasive species. So those are species that are not meant to be in an area and are threatening the biodiversity that should be there. Or it could be other things that cause damage to the ecosystem. So there's lots of different things. And so what we do as a conservation biologist is we take information, we collect that data from what we're seeing in the ecosystem around us, and then we take action based on that data in order to make sure that the ecosystem is still functioning properly.
I am so excited to go into the forest with you, and we're going to use all our senses, our eyes, our ears, and let's do it. So what do you need when you're out in the forest?
Oh, some of the most important things. I always have my hat on, my sunglasses with me. Get good footwear, so I'm not slipping on the trails. And because this is sort of my office, I always have my coffee with me, and I quite often have slippers in the car so that I can take my field boots off at the end of the day. But I think just getting outside, getting used to being outside, you learn that you kind of probably want to have bug spray, and certain times of the year you might even want a net around your face. But other than that, you can just get out with whatever you've got and enjoy nature.
I love it. Can you hear that? I just heard something. Are you a birder? Do you know what it is?
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
That's a peewee. So it's species at risk in Ontario. And that's one of the best things about this property is because we've got this really beautiful sugar maple forest that is very well established. We get some species at risk culling on a very regular basis. So we have wood thrush in here as well, and some other really exciting species at risk. And it's just an indication of how important this forest is to the biodiversity that we get to have species at risk here. Cool. If you listen, their sound is wee. That's how you can remember which one that is, because they say their own name. All right, so this is one of my favorite spots in this forest. It's really beautiful. It's full of life. You can see the forest floor here is just exploding. Unfortunately, we've missed the opportunity to see the trilliums, but there are lots of trillium plants all over the place. And we do find this one blooming jack-in-the-pulpit here, which is really, really beautiful. So it's a cool little pitcher plant. You can see that it opens up. And you can see this gorgeous flower in here. This particular one, you can see these really beautiful stripes on the throat. And this is a really cool adaptation, and you see how the petal sort of forms a roof on the top. That's actually to collect flies. So what happens is that these fungus gnat flies, they're attracted to the smell, and actually I don't know, it doesn't really smell like anything to me, but apparently to a fly it smells like fungus. they come in looking for the fungus, which doesn't exist, and then they sort of get trapped by this petal that forms the surface. And then it's trapped in there and the flower consumes it. Well, consumes the protein from it. So really cool adaptation of this plant in order to fight back against the insects. But there's loads of diversity on the forest floor. This one here is called blue cahosh. It's one of the first emerging spring flowering plants. The flower, when it comes out, it's blue and the plant kind of looks dead. It's very interesting. And then this one here is spotted jewelweed, which is a really, really fun plant if you're able to collect the seeds. They sort of pop and explode as soon as you find them, and that's just a way that they disperse. So really cool on the forest floor. You can hear the birds calling overhead and just see the diversity behind me. My background is in entomology, and so I'm really interested by insects. I think they run the planet, and we just got to see a little cool behavior that bumblebees exhibit. And the particular bumblebee that we saw right now, she was nest searching. So she was sort of hovering over the surface of the ground and exploring all sorts of little cavities and nooks and little things under leaf litter. And what she'll do is, once she's discovered a little nesting spot that she thinks is going to be good for the season, she'll start to develop her colony. With bumblebees, they have an annual colony, so they don't survive over the winter other than the brand new queens that come out at the end of the growing season. So it's fun to see spring bumblebees, the queens that are just coming out of hibernation. They're just emerging after winter and they're ready to get their colony going. Really exciting to see. So that's a little green sweat bee. You can see she's got really beautiful colors shining in the sun here. So one thing that people sometimes don't know is that there's lots of different kinds of bees, and they're very different in terms of their color, size. You can see this one is really small compared to a honeybee. And they can be all sorts of different colors. So across the world, there's over 20,000 different species of bees. In Ontario, we have 18 different species just of bumblebees. So if you watch some flowers, you'll see different bees emerge. And you can see it wasn't bothered by me at all. It wasn't concerned that I was near. Most bees, actually, if they stung you, you wouldn't even feel it. They're just interested in getting their pollen and nectar from the flowers. On this property, we like to do a lot of things to interact and provide a little bit more education for anybody who's walking the trails and interacting with nature. So this is a brand new interpretive sign that was just installed earlier this year, and it talks about what's called the 4 lives of the tree. So when we think about trees, we think about them when they're standing, when they're leafed out, or you see the needles for conifer trees. But trees actually have multiple lives, and in a forest situation like this, standing dead trees can be really, really important to things like woodpeckers, and to be the home of lots of insects that attract lots of forest birds. And even when they're fallen and they're on the ground, they then they start to decompose, and then they become and take on this whole life of its own, where it supports loads of species of fungal communities. Salamanders would be crawling around in amongst sort of the rotting wood, and then it ends up turning into the forest soil, which then supports the regeneration of the forest. So a lot of the stuff that we do here at the Nature Conservancy with our properties across Ontario and Canada is we really try to make sure that those processes of recovery and regeneration are happening on the landscape.
You say that conservation is a collaborative process, and that by working together we can have a much healthier ecosystem. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Everybody needs to be involved. The reason for that is because everyone gains benefits from nature, and nature helps us to thrive.
To do research on the ground? Like, what information do you get walking through a forest rather than just reading a textbook?
In terms of being on the ground and in a forest, I think one of the fun things that I really like is when you're exploring is to see how the forest changes as you maneuver and walk through it. So over here, we've got lots of deciduous trees. We've got lots of sugar maple, like all sorts of different species on this side. And then, meanwhile, on this side, there's a lot of hemlock. So there's a lot of variability within the forest, and those little pockets of variability also change the diversity of the animals, of the insects, of the fungus that actually live in the forest too. So when you're on the ground, when you're like in a forest, you can see these changes as you go through it, and you'd never be able to get that from a textbook. A lot of the times we like to preserve and conserve habitats that are already intact, but sometimes we do restoration work. And we step in and do that restoration work when we see that a habitat is not functioning the way it should, or it just needs to be turned back into a natural system. Now, behind us here is a pond that was a man-made pond from the previous owner, and we have since restored it. And so what I mean by restoring it, we've taken that pond offline from the stream, we diverted the stream around the pond, and we're letting that pond slowly drain over time. And then we did some plantings around. So here we've got a bit of a pollinator garden. As you can see, this is a full sun site. We're no longer in the forest. So there's different species that are adapted to live in this kind of habitat. So right here, this one is called Golden Alexander. Really beautiful, sort of member, I think it's a member of the carrot family, related to them. But really great pollinator plant. You can see here that the flowers actually create a bit of a platform. So it's really great for butterfly that pollinate this. And then over here, there's a fun little one. This one's called Prairie Smoke. This is one of my favorite sort of spring blooming plants. As you know, I'm an entomologist and I really love bumblebees. And this particular plant is only pollinated by bumblebees. But it's really cool that this particular habitat, and you can see just by all these lovely seed heads, the pollinators have been here. They're helping these plants bloom and thrive and create more of themselves through that production of seeds. So this is hairy beard tongue. It's kind of a funny name for it. But you can see with the flowers here, they're very long and tubular. So the best thing in terms of pollinating this is actually going to be hummingbirds. So hummingbirds are quite often attracted to this sort of kind of flower, comparing that to something like this kind of flower that's more pollinated by that butterfly, as I mentioned before. So you can just find out about what type of pollinators are interested in different plants and attracted by different plants just by looking at the flower shape. One of the things we want to protect the forest and natural habitats from is invasive species. And unfortunately, I've got two of them right here. You might recognize some of them. This particular one is called goutweed. This is what the leaf looks like. It's a common plant that people have in their gardens. And it's fine if it's in a garden situation. It does actually create a beautiful sort of ground cover. But when they escape into the wild is where they do a lot of damage. And they cover the forest floor and actually outcompete the native plants that should be here. The other one is this one right here. So this one is called garlic mustard. So this is a full-size garlic mustard plant. The root system here, it has these little curves in it, which helps it to anchor into the ground. And you can see that this one is still in flower. This was actually, it's a non-native plant, so it's not supposed to be here in Ontario. It's highly invasive, one of the most invasive species sort of in the area.
So we've been walking through the forest for about a couple of hours and I've spotted this and I want to know what that is.
Oh, well, it's all about being curious, right? What do you think it is?
Well, it doesn't look like a birdhouse, so I'm not quite sure.
No, it's a bat box, in fact. Bats are a really amazing species. In fact, we just had a few more species of bats that have been listed as endangered in Ontario. So, you know, protecting bat species is really, really important. And providing a house like this is actually going to be an opportunity for us to monitor bat species on the property. One of the key things whenever you're looking into a bat box is keep your mouth shut. I don't see any activity in there right now. But there are some insects in there, and I think there's a bit of a wasp nest on the one side, and certainly some spiders living up in there right now. But we keep checking it out and see if we can find some bats. This is called a plantation. This is very similar to any kind of agricultural crop, except the crop in this case is red pines. And so this was planted for the purpose of taking out the trees and using that for wood products. You can see here there's some big differences as compared to the forest that we were in on the other side. You can see on the ground there are a few plants coming up, but for the most part it's just really thick with these pine needles. And so that really stops any kind of seeds from coming in here and sprouting again. You can also see it's all just one kind of tree. It's all red pine. You can see very clearly that there are rows that these have been planted in, and they're all the same age. So what that does is it really impacts the amount of different kinds of food, space, nesting opportunities, all the things that wildlife need in order to thrive. This is all really limited in habitat like this. It's not really even a habitat, as I mentioned. In order to convert the plantation, what we're doing is we're taking this really long time scale approach. We're going to be doing thinning, and you can see here that some of the trees are marked. They've been spray painted with this red spray paint. Those are trees that are actually going to be taken out of this plantation. So when we take those trees out, what it does is it helps to open up little gaps in the forest to let sunlight to come in. Once the sunlight comes in, then that allows the breakdown of all those pine needles on the forest floor. Once that soil is exposed, seeds from the native forest can then come in. They can start to grow, and they can start to restore this back into a native forest. Important if you're visiting a natural space, a natural area, that you're staying on the designated trail system. And I know people like to go exploring. I grew up going exploring, but it is important because of the spread of invasive species, and that's one of the big threats about going off trail. When you're walking, you tend to pick up bits of soil and even seeds on the bottom of your boots. Even your dog can collect invasive species seeds and spread them into new areas when they're off leash. So some of the things we ask visitors that are coming to the Creemore Nature Preserve and any of our other properties is to stay on the trail, prevent any kind of invasive species by cleaning your boots before and after you visit any natural space, so you're not transferring those seeds, and making sure that your dog stays on leash. And I know a lot of people like to have their dog running wild, but it is really important to keep your dog on the leash, because dogs can really do a lot. Beyond invasive species, they can disturb the native wildlife, and even just by going to the bathroom in the forest, they can introduce non-native species to that forest system, excess nutrients, and it's kind of gross. So when you're out in a natural space, make sure you remember to, not make any kind of impact on that that forested system or that native habitat that you're visiting. Take out everything that you bring in, including the poop.
Today was so amazing. I enjoyed walking through the forest. I learned so much, and hopefully we've inspired kids who are watching to get their boots on and head into a forest.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to bring you to the Creemore Nature Preserve, take you for a tour, and show you some of the biodiversity here.
Thank you. Thank you to Carolyn Davies for showing us how exciting a walk in the forest can be and all the wonderful biodiversity that exists in a forest. And don't forget to head to our website, scientistandschool.ca, where you can download free resources from pond guides to bird bingo and everything in between. Now, if you're going to be heading out in nature, you should always be prepared. So here's a checklist for all you young nature explorers. Snacks are always a great idea to have with you when you are hiking, as well as a water bottle. You need to stay hydrated. Jackets, perhaps even a raincoat, and depending on the weather, you might even need some hats and gloves. An extra pair of socks, and while you're at it, you might as well add an extra pair of clothes. Sun hat, sunglasses, sunscreen, and even some chapstick with some SPF for your lips is always a good idea. Always smart to add a first aid kit to your backpack, hand sanitizer, wet wipes, bug spray, or perhaps even netting if the bugs are bad. If you're taking your furry friends along, bring some doggy bags, a hiking map, and it's always fun to add something special like binoculars or a hiking journal. That's pretty much all you need to enjoy the great outdoors. Stay safe and stay curious. See you next time.